Beloved, I want to remind you today of something that will lift a heavy burden off your shoulders. You don't have to fight every battle yourself. The God who sees in secret, the God who hears your cry, the God who numbers every tear, he is already moving on your behalf. When people hurt you, when they speak against you, when betrayal cuts deep, it's easy to want to defend yourself. But Scripture says, the Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Exodus 14:1 forward. That means you can rest knowing justice is in his hands. Today, I want to share 7 signs God is dealing with those who hurt you, not so you rejoice in their downfall, but so you can rest in his faithfulness. When God begins to deal with those who have hurt you, one of the most powerful and undeniable ways he works is through exposure. There is something in the heart of God that refuses to let lies stand forever. Even when deception seems to have the upper hand, even when manipulation seems to prosper, he has a way of pulling back the curtain at the right time and revealing what was hidden. Exposure is not about embarrassing you, it is about vindicating you. It is God's way of declaring, I saw everything, and I will not allow falsehood to define your story. We live in a world where appearances can be deceiving. People can say one thing to your face and something completely different behind your back. They can present themselves as innocent while working against you in the shadows. And for a while, it might look like they are winning. The lies might spread faster than truth. The rumors may catch fire, and the accusations may feel too heavy to fight on your own. But the God who sees all is not fooled. He knows how to bring truth to the surface, and when he does, it cannot be denied. The timing of God's exposure is important. Sometimes you may wonder why he doesn't do it immediately. You may cry out, Lord, why let this go on? Why let them get away with it? But God's timing is never late. He allows things to play out until the moment when exposure serves its full purpose. If it happened too soon, it might not have the same weight. If it happened too late, it might cause unnecessary damage. But when it happens in his timing, everyone knows the truth came to light by his hand, not by human effort. Exposure is also a protection for you. Left unchecked, lies and falsehood can create patterns that destroy reputations and relationships. When God exposes what was hidden, he is not just defending you, he is preventing a greater harm that could have happened if deception was allowed to continue. His love for you demands that he reveal what is true, because truth sets you free from the weight of accusations you were never meant to carry. Another dimension of exposure is that it humbles the proud. Many times, those who work against you operate in arrogance, thinking no one will ever know what they've done. They rely on secrecy, on false appearances, and on the silence of others. But when God exposes, he strips away the mask. What they tried to conceal becomes visible. What they whispered in secret echoes in the open. And in that moment, it becomes undeniable that God has defended you without you lifting a finger. The beauty of God's exposure is that you don't have to fight or argue your way into vindication. You don't have to spend endless energy trying to prove yourself. You can rest in peace knowing that the truth will eventually rise. It may take longer than you want, but when it comes, it will be undeniable. Your role is to keep your heart clean, to resist the temptation to retaliate, and to trust that God is faithful to reveal what needs to be revealed. An example of this can be seen in the life of Daniel. When Daniel's enemies plotted against him, they conspired to trap him through his devotion to God. They manipulated the king into signing a law that no one could pray to anyone except the king himself. Daniel remained faithful and prayed anyway, and they quickly ran to report him. To all appearances, it looked like their scheme had succeeded. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, and his enemies must have thought they had rid themselves of him forever. But God exposed the truth in the most dramatic way possible. Not only did he shut the mouths of the lions, he also turned the king's heart to recognize Daniel's innocence. The very men who plotted against him were revealed for what they truly were, and their plan collapsed under the weight of God's justice. What was hidden came to light, and Daniel was vindicated without defending himself. Perhaps in your own life, someone has spoken words to discredit you. Maybe you've been misunderstood, accused unfairly, or targeted by people who smiled to your face but spoke against you behind closed doors. It hurts deeply because it feels like the truth is powerless. But hear this, the truth is never powerless. It is patient, and when God moves, it rises with unstoppable force. What is whispered in the dark will be shouted from the rooftops, not because you exposed it, but because God himself did. The peace that comes from this truth is liberating. You don't have to chase every rumor. You don't have to defend yourself against every accusation. You can let God be your defender. When exposure comes, it comes with his authority, and no one can argue against it. That is the sign he is dealing with those who hurt you. Their lies unravel, their manipulation loses power, and truth stands tall in the end. So take comfort in knowing this, even when you don't see it yet, even when it feels unfair, even when silence seems to last too long. God is already setting the stage. And when the curtain is pulled back, your vindication will be clear, not because you fought for it, but because he fought for you. When God begins to deal with those who have hurt you, one of the clearest signs of his hand at work is that their influence begins to shrink. At first, it can seem like the very people who spoke against you, who misrepresented you, or who tried to harm you are the ones who gain more attention, more power, or more control. They may appear to have the upper hand while you are left feeling small and silenced. But time has a way of proving where God's favor truly rests. Influence that is built on manipulation, pride, or dishonor will not last because it lacks the foundation of truth and righteousness. When God is involved, he has a way of quietly but steadily reducing the power that those people have over you and over others. Their voice begins to lose weight. Their words no longer carry the same authority. The people who once followed their lead start to see through the facade. Without needing you to fight back, God reduces their reach until they no longer hold the position they once did. This is a hard truth to accept when you are in the middle of being targeted. You may wonder why their lies are believed, why people listen to them, or why their actions go unchecked. But God is patient, and his justice is often not immediate because he allows time for truth to rise. He allows space for people to reveal the fruit of their own hearts. When someone builds influence by tearing others down, it may work for a while, but it is not sustainable. Eventually, that influence collapses under its own weight, and the voice that once sounded loud becomes a faint echo. The way God shrinks their influence is often subtle at first. You may not notice it immediately, but over time their authority wanes. People begin to recognize inconsistencies in their words. They realize the story doesn't add up. Relationships they depended on for support begin to distance themselves. Opportunities that once seemed to open easily for them begin to close. It's not always a dramatic fall. It is often a slow but steady decline orchestrated by God himself. And when it happens, you don't need to celebrate their downfall. Instead, you can rest in the assurance that God has removed the burden of their control over your life. This shrinking of influence is also God's way of protecting you. Influence is power, and in the wrong hands, it can destroy reputations, futures, and peace. By reducing the power of those who set themselves against you, God is not just removing their ability to harm you, he is restoring freedom to you. What once felt like a constant cloud over your life begins to lift, and you discover that their words and actions simply don't carry the same weight they once did. Think of Saul and David as an example. Saul was the king, and his influence was undeniable. When jealousy entered his heart and he turned against David, it seemed like David's life was at risk because Saul had authority, power, and the loyalty of the people. But over time, Saul's influence began to shrink. His decisions became unstable. His words lost credibility, and the people slowly began to recognize God's hand was with David, not Saul. David never had to force his way into influence. God simply removed Saul's hold on it. By the time David became king, it was clear to everyone that the one who once had all the influence had lost it because he misused it against someone God had chosen. In your own life, you may have seen someone's words once cut you deeply. They may have had the ability to sway people against you, to change how others viewed you, or to place obstacles in your path. But if you pay attention, you may notice over time that those words no longer carry the same weight. People don't listen in the same way they once did. Their attempts to control or manipulate fall flat. And the same God who reduced Saul's influence is at work reducing theirs. The beauty of this truth is that you don't have to fight to shrink their influence yourself. If you tried, you might only appear defensive or bitter. But when you trust God to do it, the results speak for themselves. Without your interference, their platform decreases. Without your retaliation, their control fades. It becomes undeniable that it is God's hand at work, because you could never have orchestrated such a shift on your own. This is why it is so important to keep your heart clean while God works. If you allow bitterness or revenge to take root, you risk missing the peace that comes with watching Him vindicate you. But if you release it to Him, you can watch with amazement as those who once seemed larger than life lose their grip, and their attempts to harm you simply do not stick. So take comfort in this. If someone has misused their influence against you, don't despair. Influence not rooted in God cannot endure. In time, it will shrink, their voice will quiet, and their platform will fade. And when it does, you will see that God has been protecting you all along, making sure that the only influence shaping your life is His. One of the most comforting truths to understand when you are walking through seasons of pain or betrayal is that sometimes God redirects your path for your protection. There are moments in life when doors suddenly close, relationships unexpectedly end, or opportunities you thought were certain are taken away. In the moment, it feels like rejection. It feels unfair, confusing, and deeply painful. But when God is the one closing the door, what looks like rejection is actually divine redirection. He is not only removing you from harm's reach, He is also guiding you toward His perfect plan, a plan you could not see from where you were standing. When someone sets themselves against you, when they carry ill intent or try to harm your reputation, their goal is often to keep you stuck where you are or to block the good things God has for you. But the God who sees beyond your present moment knows exactly where the danger lies. He knows the conversations you didn't hear, the motives you couldn't see, and the traps that were being set for you. And because He loves you, He will not allow you to stay in a place that would ultimately destroy you. So He shifts your direction. He removes you from the environment, sometimes abruptly, sometimes in ways that make no sense at the time, but always with the intention of preserving your life and your calling. This redirection is rarely comfortable. It often comes at the cost of things you thought you needed. You may lose a job you depended on, a relationship you cherished, or an opportunity you prayed for. You may even cry out in frustration, God, why would you let this happen? But what you cannot see in the moment is that He is not punishing you. He is protecting you. He is steering you away from the very people and places that would have caused you greater harm down the road. God's protection often feels like loss, but it is actually love. He allows certain doors to close because He knows the weight that lies behind them. Imagine in walking down a hallway, reaching for a door and finding it locked. You may stand there, knocking, pleading, wondering why it won't open. Yet behind that door could be a room filled with people ready to harm you. Instead of explaining the danger, God simply locks it and says, trust me. The locked door is not rejection, it is mercy. This principle is beautifully illustrated in the life of Joseph. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and later falsely accused and thrown into prison. From a human perspective, every step of Joseph's journey looked like rejection. His brothers rejected him. Potiphar's wife rejected him. Society rejected him. But in truth, God was redirecting His path to protect both Joseph and the future of an entire nation. Had Joseph stayed in his father's house, his brothers' jealousy might have consumed him. Had he remained a servant in Potiphar's house, his destiny would have been limited. Even prison, as painful as it was, positioned him for the encounter that would eventually bring him before Pharaoh. Each redirection was painful, but every closed door was God's way of guiding him into the palace. What looked like rejection was divine protection, and what looked like detours were actually the straightest path to his destiny. In your own life, you may find that God has moved you away from certain people or situations that you thought were essential. At first, it may feel like He allowed you to lose something valuable. But over time, because you will realize that He was saving you from battles you weren't meant to fight. He was shielding you from words you weren't meant to hear and wounds you weren't meant to carry. What you lost may not have been a loss at all. It may have been God's way of clearing the path so you could walk into something greater. There is also a lesson here about trust. Trust is not proven when everything makes sense. Trust is proven when nothing makes sense. When you are standing at a closed door, when the path you wanted to take is no longer available. That is the moment you choose whether to believe God is still good. If you can believe that He is guiding you even when it feels like rejection, then you can walk with peace into the unknown. You can rest knowing that His hands are steady even when your heart is unsettled. So when you think about the people who hurt you, who may have contributed to those closed doors or painful endings, remember this: they did not win. They may have thought they removed you from a position, pushed you out of an opportunity, or ended their influence over your life on their terms. But in reality, God allowed their actions to redirect you to a safer and higher place. Just like Joseph could one day look at his brothers and say, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good," you too will see that the rejection you endured was not the end of your story. It was the hand of God, gently but firmly turning your steps away from danger and into destiny. In time, you will look back and thank God for the closed doors, the lost opportunities, and even the painful separations. You will see clearly what you could not see then, that He was protecting you from harm and positioning you for blessing. And in that realization, you will find peace. What felt like rejection was God's redirection, and that redirection was the very thing that saved your life. There is a law that God has built into the very fabric of creation, a principle that cannot be avoided no matter how powerful, wealthy, or clever someone may be. It is the law of sowing and reaping. Scripture says, "Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap." This is not a suggestion, and it is not a possibility. It is an unshakable truth. The seeds a person plants through their actions, words, and choices will, in time, produce a harvest. When people hurt you, when they betray you or mistreat you, it can feel like they will never be held accountable. It may seem as though they can act however they want without consequence. But God cannot be mocked. Eventually, the seeds of dishonor, betrayal, and cruelty that they planted will sprout, and they will eat from the harvest of their own doing. The beauty of this truth is that you don't have to make it happen. You don't have to curse them, fight them, or try to bring justice with your own hands. Life itself, under God's watchful eye, will return their choices to them. If they sowed bitterness, bitterness will return to them. If they sowed manipulation, eventually manipulation will entangle them. If they sowed dishonor, that dishonor will find its way back into their lives. The harvest always matches the seed. You cannot plant thorns and expect roses, and you cannot plant lies and expect peace. Sooner or later, the fruit reveals itself. This principle works both ways. Just as negative seeds bring a painful harvest, seeds of love, kindness, and integrity produce blessings. When you choose not to retaliate, when you choose to forgive, when you keep your heart pure in the face of pain, you are planting seeds of righteousness that God will cause to grow into favor, peace, and restoration. That's why it is so important to guard your own heart. While others may sow evil, you must sow good, because their harvest will not become yours. Their fruit is theirs alone, and yours will be determined by what you plant in the soil of your own life. The difficulty comes in the waiting. Sowing and reaping do not happen in the same season. When someone hurts you, you may want to see immediate justice. You want the fruit of their choices to appear overnight so that everyone can see what they did. But seeds take time to grow. God, in His wisdom, allows time to pass before the harvest appears. That waiting season is not God ignoring the wrong done to you. It is Him allowing the process to unfold naturally so that the harvest is undeniable. If justice came too quickly, people might dismiss it as coincidence. But when the harvest comes in its full season, no one can deny that it was the result of what was sown. Think about the story of Haman in the book of Esther. Haman hated Mordecai, a man who honored God, and he devised a plan to destroy not only Mordecai, but the entire Jewish people. With his influence, he convinced the king to issue a decree that would lead to their destruction. Haman thought he was in control. He even went so far as to build gallows on which he planned to hang Mordecai. But the seeds he sowed were seeds of hatred, pride, and cruelty. And in the end, he reaped the very harvest of those seeds. The plot turned against him, and the gallows he built for Mordecai became the very instrument of his own downfall. That is the power of sowing and reaping. Haman's intentions returned to him, and Mordecai was elevated by the same king who once signed his death sentence. This story is more than history. It is a living picture of how God works. You don't have to build gallows for those who hurt you. You don't have to plan their downfall. If they are sowing destruction, they are building their own gallows. If they are sowing dishonor, they are weaving their own trap. All you must do is stand in faith and trust that God's principle is still true. The harvest will come, and it will come in God's timing, not yours. This is why forgiveness is so freeing. When you forgive, you release the need to be their judge. You hand them over to the law of sowing and reaping, knowing that God himself oversees that law. Forgiveness does not mean what they did was right. It does not mean you must trust them again or let them back into your life. It simply means you are refusing to carry the weight of trying to bring justice yourself. You are letting God and his principles handle what only he can handle. The truth is, you cannot sow hatred and reap peace. You cannot sow betrayal and reap loyalty. You cannot sow cruelty and reap love. People may hide for a while. They may look like they are prospering, but sooner or later, the seeds will show themselves. That should not make you rejoice in their pain, but it should give you peace that justice belongs to the Lord. So if you are hurting because of what someone has done to you, take heart. They may look like they are flourishing now, but if they have sown evil, the harvest will come. And at the same time, remember that every act of kindness, every prayer you've prayed, every moment you've chosen love over bitterness, those are seeds too. And God is faithful to ensure that your harvest of blessing will come in due season. What a relief it is to know that you don't have to spend your life chasing after justice. You don't have to live with bitterness, trying to make sure people get what they deserve. God already set the principle in place. Seeds grow. Harvests come. And in the end, everyone eats from the fruit of their own choices. That is how you know God is dealing with those who hurt you not through your striving, but through his eternal law of sowing and reaping. One of the surest signs that God is dealing with those who have hurt you is when your spirit begins to experience peace that cannot be explained by your circumstances. Normally, when someone wounds you, when false words are spoken against you, or when betrayal pierces your heart, the natural response is turmoil. You replay the offense over and over. You lie awake at night. Your mind feels restless, and your heart aches with questions. You wonder why it happened, why God allowed it, and how justice will ever be served. Yet there comes a moment, sometimes suddenly, sometimes gradually, when a stillness settles over your soul. You realize you are no longer consumed with the weight of what they did to you. You are no longer fighting every thought or searching for answers. Instead, you feel a quiet assurance that everything is in God's hands. That peace is not something you manufactured. It is a gift from God, a supernatural signal that he has stepped in to handle what you cannot. This peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of God in the middle of it. The situation may not have changed yet. Those who hurt you may not have apologized, admitted they're wrong, or faced any obvious consequences. Outwardly, everything may look the same, but inwardly, something shifts. The storm is still raging around you, but the storm is no longer inside you. It is as though God places his hand on your heart and whispers, "Be still. I am fighting for you." That kind of peace cannot be explained by reason because it transcends reason. The Apostle Paul described it as the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding. It goes beyond logic, beyond what makes sense, and yet it is real and steady. The presence of this peace is one of the clearest indicators that God is actively working. It means the battle is no longer yours to carry. Peace is the evidence of divine transfer. What was once your burden is now on his shoulders. This is why you can walk through seasons of pain without being destroyed by bitterness. You are not pretending it didn't hurt, and you are not denying the reality of the offense. Instead, you are surrendering it into hands far more capable than yours. The peace is God's way of assuring you that justice, healing, and vindication are already being handled in heaven's court. This peace is also a shield. It protects you from making rash decisions in anger or from responding in ways that would compromise your integrity. Without peace, you may feel tempted to lash out, to prove yourself right, or to fight back in your own strength. But when peace rests on you, you are freed from that impulse. You no longer feel the need to vindicate yourself because you trust that God has already taken up your cause. Peace allows you to walk with dignity, even in the presence of those who hurt you. It allows you to hold your head high without resentment poisoning your heart. The story of Hannah in the Bible is a powerful illustration of this. Hannah was mocked and ridiculed by Peninnah because she could not have children. Her heart was heavy, and she was consumed with sorrow. In her anguish, she went before God in the temple and poured out her soul, weeping and praying. At first, nothing changed in her circumstances. She was still childless, and her rival was still present. But after her encounter with God, something shifted. Scripture says that after Hannah prayed, her face was no longer downcast. She had not yet received the answer she was asking for, but she left the temple with peace. That peace was the sign that God had heard her, that he was moving on her behalf, and that she no longer needed to carry the weight alone. In time, God fulfilled her desire and blessed her with Samuel, but the peace came before the breakthrough. In your own life, you may face seasons when people's actions cut deep and everything in you wants to hold on to the pain. You may feel justified in your anger, and in some ways you are. But there is a greater freedom waiting for you when you release it to God. The unexpected peace that follows is his way of showing you that he is involved now, that you don't need to keep striving. It is like stepping out of a raging current and finding yourself standing on solid ground where the water can no longer pull you under. This kind of peace doesn't mean you stop caring or that you no longer feel the hurt. Rather, it means the hurt no longer controls you. It means you can go about your day without being defined by what others did. It means you can smile again, not because everything is fixed, but because you trust the one who will fix it. That peace becomes a testimony to those around you. People may wonder how you can remain calm when you had every reason to be bitter. They may question why you are not fighting back, and your answer will simply be, because I know God is handling it. That testimony is often more powerful than any defense you could give. So if you have been wrestling with hurt and longing for justice, pay attention when peace begins to rise in your spirit. Don't dismiss it as weakness or indifference. Recognize it as God's signal that he has stepped in. Let that peace guard your heart and mind. Let it free you from the heavy burden of revenge. And let it remind you that the one who promised to fight for you has already taken the battle into his own hands. Peace in the middle of pain is not natural. It is supernatural. It is God himself whispering, "Rest, child, I've got this." When people hurt you, it can seem at first like they walk away untouched. They go about their lives as if nothing happened. While you carry the heaviness of betrayal, false words, or mistreatment, they may appear unbothered, even thriving, while you are left broken and confused. But one of the surest signs that God is at work is when a quiet reversal begins to happen. You, the one who was wronged, begin to experience peace and rest, while the ones who caused the pain can no longer escape the unease within their own hearts. They may still smile in public, they may still wear confidence on the outside, but inwardly they are restless. Their sleep is troubled, their thoughts are unsettled, and their hearts are not at peace. This is the hand of God pressing on them, dealing with them in ways you cannot see. Restlessness is one of the tools God uses when he begins to deal with someone's wrongdoing. It is not always a punishment in the way we imagine. Often it is conviction. The Spirit of God has a way of disturbing the comfort of those who have acted unjustly. He does not let them find peace until they confront what they have done. They may try to ignore it, to distract themselves with work, entertainment, or success, but that inner restlessness follows them. It gnaws at their conscience, reminding them that they cannot run from the truth. It is God himself saying, "You cannot stay at ease while you've sown harm into another's life." At the same time, God gives rest to the one who was wronged. That rest does not mean you forget what happened or that the pain instantly disappears. Instead, it is a deep assurance that you are no longer carrying the battle on your own. It is God's way of lifting the weight off your shoulders and reminding you that he is fighting for you. The very thing that once kept you awake at night no longer controls you because God has settled your heart. You can walk forward in peace, not because the situation has been resolved yet, but because you trust that it is in God's hands. That contrast, your rest and their restlessness, is a clear sign that heaven has stepped in. This is important because it often looks the other way around at first. When wounds are fresh, you are the one who feels restless. You replay the hurt in your mind. You long for justice. You wonder how they can live so freely after what they've done. But over time, as you release it into God's hands, a shift occurs. Peace begins to guard your heart, and suddenly you no longer feel enslaved to the offense. Meanwhile, those who once seemed so confident cannot shake the unease within them. It is not visible to everyone, but it is real. God knows how to disturb the oppressor until they either repent or reap the full harvest of their actions. The story of King Saul and David is one of the clearest examples of this. Saul had every advantage. He wore the crown, he had the army, and he held the throne. David, on the other hand, was innocent yet forced to flee for his life. To anyone watching, it looked like Saul was in control and David was the victim. But Saul's life became increasingly restless. Scripture says an evil spirit tormented him and he could not find peace. His jealousy of David consumed him, and no matter what he achieved, it wasn't enough to quiet his heart. David, though hunted and hiding in caves, carried peace. He worshiped, he wrote psalms, and he trusted God's timing. The king who had everything had no rest, while the young man being pursued unfairly carried a supernatural calm. That is what God does. He troubles the oppressor and gives peace to the oppressed. In your own life, you may not see the full picture of what God is doing in the lives of those who wronged you, but you can be assured that He knows how to weigh on their hearts. He knows how to keep them awake at night with conviction they cannot escape. You may never hear their confession, and they may never admit their restlessness to you, but it is there. At the same time, you will know God is working because you are no longer restless yourself. You find yourself able to smile again, able to enjoy life again, and able to move forward without carrying the bitterness. That is not natural. It is supernatural. It is God showing you that He has taken up your cause. This truth should free you from the burden of trying to make things right yourself. You don't need to chase them down, prove your case, or try to force them to feel guilty. That is not your job. Restlessness belongs to them. Rest belongs to you. Your role is to keep your heart soft, to keep trusting God, and to let Him handle what only He can handle. In time, you will see that the reversal is complete. They cannot find peace until they face what they've done, and you cannot lose peace because God has already fought for you. So if you find yourself wondering whether God is moving, look for this sign. Look for the shift in your own spirit, the unexpected calm that settles in your heart. Know that while you rest, He is troubling those who hurt you, pressing on them in ways you cannot. That is the hand of God, and it is proof that justice belongs to Him. One of the most undeniable signs that God is dealing with those who have hurt you is that in spite of everything they tried to do, you keep rising. Their intent was to push you down, to bury you under the weight of pain, shame, or opposition. They may have thought their betrayal or their cruelty would end your influence, silence your voice, or destroy your hope. Yet when God has His hand on your life, no attack is strong enough to cancel His plan. Instead, the very things that were designed to harm you become the stepping stones that lift you higher. Elevation in the midst of adversity is one of God's greatest testimonies because it proves that His favor is greater than human opposition. Elevation does not always come in ways that people expect. Sometimes it looks like promotion, influence, or new opportunities. Other times it looks like a deeper peace, a stronger character, and a resilience that cannot be shaken. Either way, the message is clear. While others worked against you, God worked for you. What was meant for your destruction becomes the soil in which God plants your destiny. Instead of being buried, you are actually being positioned to grow. The more they tried to hold you down, the more God used that pressure to propel you upward. This is not just about being lifted above your enemies. It is about being elevated into the fullness of God's purpose for your life. Elevation is God's way of vindicating you without you needing to fight for yourself. He raises you up so that everyone can see His favor on you, and in that moment, it becomes obvious that no weapon formed against you could prosper. This kind of elevation is not rooted in pride, but in purpose. God does not lift you so you can boast. He lifts you so you can shine for His glory. The life of Joseph is perhaps the most powerful example of this truth. Joseph was deeply betrayed by his own brothers, thrown into a pit, and sold into slavery. For years, it looked like his life was heading downward, not upward. He was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. From the outside, it appeared that the attacks against him had succeeded. He was forgotten, abandoned, and stuck in a dungeon. Yet, even in the prison, God's favor was on Joseph. He rose to a place of responsibility among the prisoners, trusted with leadership in the very place where he was supposed to be broken. And at just the right time, God elevated him from the prison to the palace, making him second only to Pharaoh in the land of Egypt. The very betrayal that was meant to destroy him positioned him for the destiny God had prepared. When famine struck the land, Joseph's leadership saved not only Egypt, but also the very brothers who betrayed him. What they intended for evil, God used for good, and Joseph's elevation was undeniable. That story is not just ancient history. It is a pattern of how God works in the lives of his people today. Perhaps you have experienced betrayal at the hands of those closest to you. Maybe you've been lied about, overlooked, or treated unfairly. For a while, it may seem like you are going backward rather than forward. But if you remain faithful and trust God, you will find that every setback becomes part of the setup for your elevation. You may not see it right away, but in time, you will look back and realize that the pit, the prison, and the pain were all steps on the path to the palace God had prepared for you. The power of God's elevation is that it cannot be stopped by human hands. People may conspire against you, but they do not have the final say. When God decides to lift you, no one can keep you down. That is why you don't need to waste energy fighting back or proving yourself. You can rest in the confidence that while others are plotting, God is positioning, and when the moment comes, his elevation will be so evident that no one can deny his favor on your life. This elevation also serves as a testimony. When people see you rise after being attacked, they know it was not your own strength. They know it was not your own strategy. They recognize that God must have been the one who lifted you. That testimony brings him glory and draws others to faith. Your elevation becomes a beacon of hope for those who are still in their pit or their prison, showing them that God can do the same for them. So if you feel pressed down by the weight of betrayal, take heart. The story is not over. The same God who elevated Joseph, who lifted David from the fields to the throne, who raised Esther from obscurity to royalty, is still at work today. The very things that were meant to bury, you will become the foundation of your rise. The attacks that were meant to silence, you will become the stage for your voice. And when God elevates you, it will not just be for your benefit, it will be for the blessing of many others. In the end, this is the greatest sign that God is dealing with those who hurt you, not their downfall, but your rise. While they remain entangled in the harvest of their choices, you are lifted into the destiny God prepared for you. That is the ultimate reversal. That is the victory of God's justice. And that is why you can walk in confidence today, because no matter what was meant for your harm, God will turn it for your good, and in the midst of it all, you will rise. So today, release the need to prove yourself, defend yourself, or fight back in your own strength. Rest in the truth that God himself is dealing with those who hurt you. Don't carry bitterness. Don't let offense take root. Keep your heart clean, because while he's working on them, he's also preparing to bless you. Remember this, your vindication doesn't come from people. It comes from the Lord. Trust him, and you'll see his hand move in ways more powerful than you ever imagined.